How satisfying is that? I've had a grand total of one person ask me for a tutorial. I've never done one before, so please be gentle. This is the first and possibly the last. We'll see how it goes. But this effect is heavily inspired by Ducky 3D's tutorial, just with some minor tweaks. So we're covering animating and moving objects to curves, particle system, dynamic paint and displacement, basic scene setup, and shading to make things look soft and squishy. So opening Blender, I'm in Blender 3.00 Alpha. I don't think it matters what version you're in because it's pretty basic stuff. New scene, A, delete, get rid of everything. Shift A and start with the big sphere. It's a UV sphere. I need this 2 meters. And I want an even number of verts. I'm going to go 64 by 64 and right click shade smooth. So that's the main ball. Now we need a smaller ball. I'll just hide that, H. Mesh another UV sphere. This time we only need it about 0.25 meters and we don't need so many verts for this one. Again, shade smooth. And finally, we need a tube. These are going to be the hairs that are part of the particle system on the main sphere. Shift A, mesh, we need a cylinder. Rotate it on the x-axis by 90, RX 90. Now I need to scale this down, S by to about a third of the size, so S 0.3, and scale it along the y-axis to make it a bit longer by about 3 times. So 3, enter. So I'm going to shade smooth and it does this weird thing on the end, but it doesn't matter because if I tab into edit mode, select 3 on the numpad, then that selects the face select mode. I can go select these two ends by holding shift and clicking on both, Control B, and just move the mouse until it gives this bevel, and then I'm just going to subdivide that by rolling the mouse up a couple of times, up somewhere like that. Tab out of edit mode, there we go. One final thing we need to do with this is Control A, apply all transforms. I'm just going to set the object origin back to the geometry, but that just means everything is all sorted and ready for the particle system. I'm just going to move this out the way, G, move it along the y-axis, check it over here, unhide everything, Alt-H. One thing I forgot to do, I need to subdivide this because it needs a lot of geometry, so Control-2 will give it a subdivision surface modifier at level 2. I'll just do that again, Control-2, otherwise you can just add the modifier here. So next we need to add some curves for the smaller balls to follow. Shift A, add a curve, circle. You can't see it because it's 1 meter, so it's inside here. So if we bump that up to 2 meters, there it is. Now I'm just going to duplicate this because we want 4 circles in total. Shift D to duplicate, right click, R, and then we rotate it on the y-axis by 90, enter. So we've got 2 more. Select one, I'll do this one. Duplicate it, R, Y, 45 degrees. And duplicate that one, R, Y, what's that, 90 degrees. So now if I hide this big main sphere, we've got an atom. So with this atom, I'm just gonna Control A, apply all transforms to each one of these. Back to our small sphere, Control A, all transforms. So this is now ready to be duplicated. Shift D, duplicate a few times. Now we've got 3. Select them all, Shift, click top and bottom, M, new collection, call that balls. There we go. So now we need to add a curve modifier to each one of these balls. Curve, pick a Bezier circle. Now you can see this deform axis is X. So if I go on this object, G, X, it will rotate around here. Same with the next one. Different Bezier circle this time. GX moves it around the circle. So we're going to have the camera facing here. We don't want to see any of the balls to start with because the particle system won't look right, especially with the indentations from the dynamic paint. We want it to start off plain and then have the animations, indentations, the movement of the hairs, and then all go back to not being able to see anything so it can loop. So I'm going to put all of these balls at the back to start with. So just GX, in fact I might just select them all, GX around here somewhere. So if we rotate round, just hide this for now, H. So now we need to animate the trajectory of each one of these along its own x-axis, and it just happens to work out that it's 12.5 meters for this particular sized project. So I'll pick a ball to start with, put it in the middle and use that as a reference, GX, and put it there. Control A to apply all transforms. So now it will rotate around the x-axis 12.5. It doesn't have to be relative to anything because it's all zeroed out. So let's put a keyframe in. Oh, so my project is 24 frames a second. I'm going to have this 240 frames. That's 10 seconds long. I want it to go round twice. So I'm going to put a keyframe in the middle and at the end to do a full rotation, starting off at 0 location. So I location 120, do a full loop GX, and then that's 12.5 meters distance all the way around. I location. So now that will animate, and then jump to the end, GX 12.5, I location. You need to set the interpolation between these. As you can see, it slows down towards the end, speeds up, and then slows down at the beginning. So set the interpolation by selecting all keyframes, A, T, and then set that to linear so it's constant. So now we need to animate all the others so that they don't intersect with this at all. So pick another one. I'm going to have this GX. I'm going to put it a little bit further away. Control A, apply transforms. Zeroes everything out. 0 keyframe, I location. 120 GX 12.5 I. Jump to the last keyframe, GX 12.5 I. So now A, T, linear. They shouldn't intersect. There we go, just missing each other. So now you have to do the same for the other two. Let's see if this intersects. Oh yeah, it does a little bit just here. So we need to move that GX ahead. So I'm just going to bump this a little bit further along the x-axis. Minus, there we go. Right, last one is the trickiest one because you have to make sure it doesn't intersect with any of the others. So there we have it. We've got all of them rotating, none of them intersecting. It takes a bit of fine tuning, but once you've got the locations in place to start with, then you're good to go. So now if we go back to where the camera's going to view it, you can see at the start, at the back, all come around to the front, and then go back to the back. Okay, now we need the dynamic paint. Bring back your main sphere. You need to go to the physics properties, dynamic paint. We want this to be the canvas, add canvas. And these balls, they all need to have dynamic paint brush type. Add brush. Do that for this, each one. So click on your sphere, dynamic paint. I just played around with the settings a bit. So scale influence, I want that down to 0.62. I found that looked quite good. It just makes it a little bit more subtle. And I don't want it to last forever. So we want the dissolve on, and we want the time to be about 60 frames long. Now we need to bake this. Go to cache, bake. Now if we watch this back, we should see when the balls come round, they're making some nice indentations that fade away. Now we need to add a particle system to this main sphere. Make sure the sphere is selected, particle system under particle properties, add. We want this to be hair. We want about 10,000 of these. And we want the hair length to be quite small, 0.2. Segments we can drop down to 3. We want hair dynamics. That's what's going to make the hairs move in relation to the collision objects and themselves. Under collisions, this is where we add the collision collection balls. So the balls will actually impact on these hairs now because they're in their own collection. Under render, we need to change each one of these hairs to an object and select the object as the cylinder. And we can change the scale of this, bump it up to about 0.5. One final thing I forgot to do. We don't want that cylinder to be in the render, so just uncheck that box and it won't be seen in the render. One thing I forgot to do, under structure, we want the stiffness to be a little bit higher so that they don't bend so much. So now we need to bake this particle system. In the physics settings in the particle system, go down to cache and bake. So now if we go back to the beginning, play that, we should see the hairs reacting to the balls as collision objects and also reacting to the indentations. First we're going to set up the camera, Shift A, camera. I'm going to set it somewhere like that. Control Alt 0, snap to view. If I press G, move the camera somewhere nice. My GY, move a bit closer. There we go. Just going to set up my scene as well. I'm going to have it rendered in cycles. GPU 200. Adaptive sampling on. Denoising on. Use optics. And performance, I always set my tile size to 256. So we need some lighting. I'm going to add a top light and a back light. Shift A, light, area. Just going to grab this, put it somewhere like here, and rotate it on the top. And rotate it with R, so it's coming from there. I'll make that light a nice, bright 600. I'm going to make it a disc. And we'll make it a bit bigger. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at that. So this is just for highlights, really. We're still going to add some scene lighting separately. I'm going to duplicate that. Move it over here. Rotate it. And have this actually on the bottom. So grab that. Numpad 1. So when you rotate it, it looks it's quite precise. I'm going to change the color of this to a nice soft pink. I've actually got a hex code for that. I'm just going to make this light a bit softer. Right, so now we need world lighting. Under the world, color, I'm going to go for a sky texture. Pretham. I'm going to set the shadow around the top a little bit. Turbidity, just bump it up a little bit. And strength down to about 0.1. I'm just going to move this top light down a bit more. I might actually have this coming from the front. I think that's how I did it. Numpad 3, rotate. Let's give it a bit more light. There we go. So now we need to shade it. I'm going to shade the cylinders and the main sphere the same. Let's get it in a view where I can see all the objects. Select the main sphere, shading. Get rid of these. New material. Sphere. Sphere. There's nothing complicated about this one. I'm just going to pick a nice soft pink color. Something like that. Add subsurface scattering. 0.3 looks quite good. And bring the roughness down a little bit to 0.4. So we need to give the cylinder the same material. Give that the sphere material. If we jump into the camera view and rendered mode, see what that looks like. Yes, good. Maybe I'll make this a little bit redder. Okay, so now the balls. New material. Balls. I'm going to pick a slightly different color, just make it a little bit redder this time. I'm going to give it a bright red subsurface scattering. Bump that right up to 0.7. Roughness right up on this one to 0.7. Now we need to give all the balls the same material. Find your spheres. This one's got the color, so select all the others. And then that one with the color last as your selection. Object, link transfer data, and where's materials? There we go. If you go back to a layout, play this, it will look very terrible because I've got a very terrible computer. So to render, I rendered this as a PNG sequence and then compiled it later. So once you've got the PNG sequence done, jump to your start frame, change this to video sequencer, and then add your image sequence, find all your frames, add them in there, and then change this to whichever one you want. I use AVI JPEG. And that's it. Thanks to Underfunded Scientists for encouraging me to do this tutorial. And thanks to Ducky 3D for inspiring this particular effect. If there's any issues with your renders, they're not coming out right, send me a message or drop me a comment and I'll try and figure out a workaround. If you do manage to do your own effect like this, I'd love to see it. Please upload it to YouTube and post a comment with the link to it so I can watch it. I don't know how else to really do it. But yeah, thanks for watching.